Hello, everybody. This is Dwayne Sr and Tony Stressel. And our guest today is Kristian Schultz, joining us on Tree Actions, the human forestry podcast, where people of the trees talk about their experiences, not only professionally being part of trees, but also how trees has affected their lives personally. And Kristian, want to welcome you to this episode. And we always kind of kick off by asking people where they feel their journey into the trees kind of began. That, like, if you trace back, where did it kind of start for you?
Man, it started before I knew it started. Have you ever had guests or have you experienced anything like that? It started long before I really knew it started.
Absolutely.
It kind of started directly out of high school. I joined the United States Navy and I did 4 years with the United States Navy. I was stationed on board Battleship Missouri, and that's when I discovered leadership, and that not all my leaders were all that great, but some of them were stellar, and I remember their teachings to this day. And when I say that my career in arboriculture probably started before I knew it, when somebody thrust a piece of rope in my hands and said, "Here, Schultz, master this move," and wanted me to fold the line in a certain direction with the working end palms up in my right hand. And I didn't have the vocabulary for what he was teaching me to do, but he was teaching me to speed tie a bowline.
Right.
And so I did that, and for days and days and days. And he said, we had lots of time at sea. One time I didn't see land for 92 straight days.
Wow.
And, it was fun. But I would practice this move with the length of line, and it was kind of like a wax on, wax off deal where it wasn't going to reveal, the end result wasn't going to reveal itself for some time. But I practiced this move over and over and over. And then he said, now take it to this level and this level. And pretty soon I had a bowline in my hand, an end line fixed loop. And I could do it in a blur. I could do it in about 2 seconds. And I still didn't know much of its practical application, but I learned a lot of knots, and I ended up on, constructing a knot board, a big, beautiful, decorative and functional knot board. They were bragging rights, and they've been in use. People have been doing them for centuries, displaying their knots and things like that. And I was on the team that built this elaborate knot board. I don't know where it is to this day. It was big as a pool table, and it had working models on it. It had davits, and it had a rescue kit on it. And it was just gorgeous. The thing was a work of art. It took first place in this huge fleet contest. But all that to say that's when I first discovered Ashley's Book of Knots and started, taking a fascination with knots. When I got into arboriculture, I didn't immediately draw the correlation between arboriculture and the nautical arts. But after a few weeks, I was like, well, how do you do this move? And I want to learn to climb. And I'm seeing that you're tying branches off to lower them. And they said, well, you got to tie a running bowline. And I started thinking, and I started remembering. And after watching them do it, I was like, oh, I tapped into my old teachings from Chief Campbell when I was in the Navy. And I just went, and there it was, running bowline. And it was about 5 seconds. And they asked me, how did you do that? And I said, well, I just kind of remembered. I know that my muscles don't have brains, but I guess you might attribute it to the neural pathway running from my brain to my hands, and it just obeyed the command. And after that, I started drawing a correlation. I remember saying out loud, all of this is nautical in origin. We rigged ships for centuries before we ever rigged trees.
Yep.
But I was roundly rejected because I was the greenie. So they flushed that perspective right away. And then later on, 5 or 6 years down the road, I took a one-day class with Ken Palmer, and Ken had said, everything we do in the industry is nautical in origin. Mm-hmm. A GRCS is a cabin top winch, just mounted horizontally. And his perspective on things was really validating, and I have not let go of that since.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. And not only that, I think it's been suggested it goes even so far as the trees connection, not just the ships, but the building of the ships, which required careful lowering of sections of trunk in order to build the masts and then lifting them onto and installing them on the galleons. That all was rope and rigging work. And
Yes.
and that's the true origins of arboriculture. I truly believe, like, and even back then, it wasn't just about, the history talks about the war machines and the galleons and the cannons, but people were living and enjoying gardens and trees as well. And there were people of affluence, they may have been kings and noblemen of whatever, and, but they had gardens and they had people caring for those gardens and trees. And so I think there was a strong correlation between those arts, and that part of history kind of got lost. That's talked about how, especially in Europe after the World Wars, like the ancient connection between arboriculture and those tradesmen that, who knows, and weekend work is pruning trees for the king, and during the week you're building ships for him. Like, who knows.
Yes, and while maybe to a lesser extent, the equestrian arts as well
Mm.
it's a rope discipline. If you can't secure your horse out in the desert to some suitable anchor point, you will die. And and so equestrians have been using tension fibers to perform tasks that were absolutely critical
True.
for hundreds of years too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a very good point.
And I
Not
would
to
imagine
mention,
those noblemen could whip up a clove hitch in a blurred manner.
yeah, and animal husbandry and fishermen as well. Farmers and fishermen, no stranger to to ropes and knots either.
The bow and arrow and weaponry,
Right.
of course.
And heck, I guess you can go all the way back to the pyramids, right?
Yes, all of that between fire and tension fibers, we would not be here. That's
Yeah,
true.
that's an interesting concept. Wood, rope, and fire. Man, those three things probably make it. That's pretty pivotal, isn't it?
It is, and all of which predated Christ by hundreds of thousands of years.
Yeah, exactly.
When I started,
Wow.
when I started, when I started in 1991, I answered an ad for a climber, and I got this person on the phone, and he said, "I'm sorry, we are looking for someone that is actively, trained in climbing." And I was with my aunt Terry, and she said, the short story is he was not giving me a yes. He was telling me no and being as polite as he could, and I wasn't taking no for an answer. And she said, well, it only stands to reason if there's climbers, they need people on the ground running brush to a chipper or something like that. And she said, you just tell him if he doesn't hire you, his whole day is going to suck. And I said, you don't hire me, your whole day is going to suck. And he said, look, you listen closely to me. You meet me tomorrow morning at the corner of Andersonville Road and Dixie Highway at the Sunoco station. You wear long pants, bring gloves, pack your lunch, and don't be late. And that was in 1991. I think about 5 or 6 years ago. I paid that person's way into TCIA Expo. So that lot
Wow.
when it all comes back full circle, they were the people that I first worked with. There was two owners, and it was a small company, a truck and chipper and a bucket truck that was down a lot of the time, but they were Jehovah's Witnesses, and that was important to me because of their faith and the conduct that was expected of them. They never shouted, they never swore, they never lost their heads when things went wrong.
Mm.
And that meant a lot to me because I'd had enough of that explosive type leadership when I was in the military. And
Mm.
sometimes what I was seeing out on deck when leaders would have these absolute diarrhea moments of explosive name calling, like they were surrounded by idiots, I was like, something in me said, that's not leadership. And yet I have no recourse against that kind of leadership. And so it made me, being in the Navy, as much as it was a wonderful experience, I became very, very sensitive to leadership styles. So it meant a lot to me to come into the industry, not knowing anything, and seeing the level of patience that it took to train me just to become an adequate ground person, where I knew how to gas and oil saws without mixing the components up, and how to tie knots, how to clear things, how to get the working ends back to them to continue their work. And they were very, very patient with me. And then about 6 months later, they hired a guy named Brian, and Brian already knew how to climb. He didn't have a driver's license, so I had to drive. And he was really, really abusive. And so that changed the way I felt about a lot of things. And he had just done some time. So he was pretty rough around the edges, and I was willing to fight. I'm like, no, wait a second. This isn't anything that you beat me up for. You don't get it. And he was like, no, you don't get it. And you've been under the little wing of these Jehovah's Witnesses, and they've been all candy coating, and that's not the reality of tree work. So he schooled me to the realities of tree work, all right. And we ended up at each other's throats for a long time. And he threatened me with violence on a weekly basis. And that was very difficult for me, but my family was very supportive, and they kept saying, don't quit, no matter what you do, don't quit. If you quit, he wins. So right. I just never let him win. And at one point they put us together, and they said, clearly there's some issues between the two of you, and we're going to have to resolve them. And, we were at breakfast one morning, and they said, Brian, we'll let you go first. And Brian said, you just don't listen. You don't listen to anything I say. You just go off and do your own thing. And he vented, and it wasn't real cohesive. And then it came my turn. And that's where I said, Brian, you're teaching me at a kindergarten level, and I have some foundation. He says, oh, yeah, what kind of foundation do you have? And that's when I just told him, I did 4 years in the United States Navy. I circumnavigated planet Earth twice. I've worked under the leadership of Navy SEALs who were a lot tougher than you, and they never lost their cool. They provided strict direction that I needed, and they saw what my needs were as far as, is that clear to you, Schultz? Can you repeat back to me? They just knew how to lead. And I said, and one day, Brian, what's going to happen? I'm going to climb circles around you someday. And I always want you to remember that on the outside, when you tell me, go do this and go do that and take care of this and take care of these and fill up the water and don't forget the saws, and you're bossing me around, that on the outside, I'm always going to do everything that you want me to do, probably faster than you expect me to do. And on the inside, as far as you being my leader, you're fired. And on the outside, all you're going to see is my smile, and I'm going to do everything you say. Yes, Brian. Yes, Brian. Yes, Brian. That's what I'm going to do. And on the inside, you're fired. Wow. Brian, I think Brian's dead.
Right. Yeah, it's how much of it's we talk about a little bit. We've got into it with a couple people on the show, but like how much of that personality or dysfunction, I don't know what the right word is, but is part of this industry. Is it any different than any other industry, do you think, Kristian, or does the arboriculture somehow attract that thrill-seeking, addictive type personality person? And then, is there more of them? Is there less of them? Is it the way it's always been? Like, I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I think that leadership models have changed. Everybody calls themselves a trainer now, and I don't say that to disparage the training sector whatsoever, but I think that people know that there are other leadership models available to them. And today's working, I think the younger generation, many people in my generation, I consider myself a little older now. I was so fortunate to have seen so much in this industry, 32 years, and not all of them good years in terms of my track record and such. But right. Somebody in the industry, somebody in tree care said, today's youth does not accept hard leadership anymore. They know that they can go somewhere else for a different leadership model. So all the screaming, shouting, swearing, demanding, down talk, all of that is falling by the wayside, and leaders are now challenged to find a different approach to get the results that they want. And I'm not saying we should soften up or that kids are mamby-pamby or they don't know how good they've got it. I'm not saying any of that. That the younger generation is wise. They know they don't have to put up with it. They don't. They can go somewhere else, or they can stand up to a leader and say, that's not working for me.
Right,
so
right,
I,
right. Yeah, I think there is a different perspective. You know, we had Don Blair on the show, and he was talking a little bit about how there seems to be a lot of I guess younger people, the newer generation, that work for a short period of time, relatively speaking. Like they wouldn't endure what you went through, with Brian. They I understand that they're wiser now. Maybe they don't need to because people aren't that way, but they, I got the impression from them that, and I may be wrong, Tony, correct me if I understood it incorrectly, but that they're almost leaving too soon. They're too aware to say, and they're these, people, a lot of, much more common to only after very few years, less than 10, at a company, they're starting their own traveling Wilbury show, and they're one-man operation, and they're like this hired gun, they're like a Top Gun, and they have this grandiose almost attitude of, you hire me, you pay me this, and I'll go somewhere else if you don't want me. And his concern was, I found quite interesting, was who's mentoring these kids, who's continuing them on their journey when they're on their own, who's providing that leadership when you got these independent contractors. Which, did I get that right, Tony? Was that kind of the gist of it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I've seen it too. Like, it's the standard pattern is you work at a place and you leave there for whatever reason. A lot of times, to Kristian's point, it's poor leadership, or no leadership, or you're put in a position to be the leader, but you've never been given leadership training. But for whatever reason, you leave and you go out on your own, and now you're a subcontract climber, and you might have a decent skill set, but every time you show up on the job, you're the top dog. There's nobody to learn from anymore. And I think a lot of these guys form some pretty poor work habits, and they might have a good skill set, but I think to Don's point was, how's it going to grow if you're always the best guy, no matter what your skill level is, you're the best guy on the crew. You're never going to learn anything. Because I mean, and I saw it in my own career, I was always very fortunate to be able to work with some of the best arborists in the world, and I just learned to shut up and listen and learn. But I was fortunate. So I think that's where Don was coming from.
Yeah, man. When about 4. I went unchallenged as the best climber at a company for a little over a year, and you start to believe yourself. You start to believe others. People ask you questions, and I got ego boosts from so many people. And then I went to work for my friend Jim Rudolph in South Bend, Indiana. And that was a life-changing experience for me. I had 4 or 5 years experience, and I was climbing spurless. I wasn't yet footlocking, but I was climbing spurless. This was in 1994, 1995. And I never wore a helmet, didn't wear any head protection, one-handed every chainsaw cut that I made. Really didn't wish to hear any training or, because I wanted to be the top person. I already knew I was so certain of myself. And then one day he approached me and on a job site after I hit the ground. I had been laying down the butt ends of these piles of brush, doing a big removal. And I would make separate piles with the butt ends all facing the gate opening. I would make individual piles that were about big enough for a tough ground guy to grab up the whole thing and go. And I thought that was, I had a CDL. I had an A with air. I thought I behaved like I owned the company. And he approached me and he said, I have to let you go. And I was stunned. I was like, you can't be serious. And he said, yes, I have to let you go. And I said, what, did you run out of work? And he said, no, I didn't run out of work. You're my biggest risk taker. You're my next workers' compensation case. I know exactly how this ends. You're going to cut yourself or you're going to fall, because I free climbed everything.
Oh.
I free climbed for years. But I'm Kristian Michael Schultz. What could possibly go wrong? And I believed myself. I was stunned. And he said, you fall into this category, Kristian. I've seen guys like you before. Yes, you have, he said, I only have 3 years more in service than you do, but I have seen this many, many times. And I know how this ends. You're going to cut yourself or you're going to fall, and we're going to have to pay for it. I'm going to try to put my kids through college with this company, and you're the only thing standing between me and that goal, as far off as that might seem. And he was laying it on the line to me. And I said, but you know what? I'm the only CDL here, and you're a CDL dependent. He said, I will drive these guys down the road in my trucks illegally before I'll have you on site for another day. And he said, at the end of the day, just go home. And he said, last week I'm trying to coach you through this move. And I said, Kristian, if you would just turn your body 45 degrees to your left, your life will be so much easier, and you can keep both hands on that chainsaw. And you were like, bah. You just reached over, one-handed it all out, while other people are on the ground and they think that you're a god because you can climb trees and make sticks. And you know what else, Kristian? Your climbing sucks. I was floored. I could not believe what I was hearing. But sure enough, at the end of the day, I went home and I started writing "Your climbing sucks" on a sheet of paper. And the phone rang, and it was Jim Rudolph. And he said, this is not a conversation. I just want you to listen. If you can come back to my company and obey all of my safety directives and always wear chaps and always wear a helmet and put your shirt on when you're working. Oh yeah, I had long hair, dude. I had a killer mullet. You should have seen me, Dwayne. I was deadly looking. It was Kristian Michael Schultz. Had all the answers. And he said, if you can obey all my directives, you can have your job back. And he said, but the first time I see you one-handing a chainsaw, free climbing, cutting without chaps, as soon as you get outside of this little box, I'm not going to say a word to you. I'm going to tape your last paycheck to the windshield of your car, and you will know that that is the end of us, and I have to go right now because I could be bidding more work, but no, I'm on the phone once again trying to talk you into being safer. And man, he hit me square over the head. And the next day I went in and I got so focused in on safety. To me, it was ridiculous. And to me, he wasn't going to make any money, but he kept saying, I have bid this work comfortably so that we can do our work safely. I've bid it at a profit. So don't worry about how long it takes you. And I had a lot of adjusting to do, but fast forward 10 years, I do training at his company. He's one of my customers now. But that was pivotal. That and moving on into the competition circuit was a big game changer for me.
Right. It's a common theme we hear too, where the competition was like almost a direct, like Tony talks about it was a direct line to like the renaissance of his entire career. Really, like it was for a lot of us, and Kristian, listening to your story, I have to say, I never thought of it quite in that way. I mean, yeah, hard hat. I worked for a long time. No hard hat. Never tied in. I was fortunate enough. I never free climbed. Well, that's not true. It was climb to the top and tie in, and try not to cut. Yeah, try not to cut too many things on the way up. If you have to, you have to. But I never was tied in until I got up to the top as high as I could go.
Yeah, I think that's what I meant by free climbing was climbing unsecured.
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah. And then I would, even retying, like pull your rope out to move it, like the whole concept. I remember the first time I went to a comp and I'd never seen throw line. It was when it was in Bismarck, North Dakota. And, I thought I was I'm going to show these people. And that was, Ken, that was his second win, I think. Right. And I'm watching these guys going, what the frick are they doing? Holy shit. And then throw line, I just, actually, I think I got damn third or some stupid thing in throw line because I got lucky. But then it came to the work climb, before there was a work, like it was just the climb where you had to throw in, and I could not. You got 5 shots, right? And I'm on my last chance. Ditch the ball. I'm going my own way, and I can't free climb. And all that's in my head is, I can just climb to the top of this thing and work this tree. This is no problem. But you idiots need me to be tied in. What the hell is this? So I started this brutal ascent with the lanyard, like one over trying to figure out how not to ever be detached. And I was so pissed off, but it was like, okay, obviously it's doable because then you watch these guys do it. And yeah, it's quite it really, I don't know why, Kristian, I've heard others talk about it, but you really brought me back to remembering those times and how much we've changed, and to learn. Tony, I don't know if you ever did that, Tony. Did you ever
No, I was very fortunate through my father's influence and my older brother's influence too. They were very much on the front curve of all that. So I learned, to tie in all the time. I mean, the closest you would get is occasionally if you were you might, you always at least have a lanyard, you'd lanyard up. You might not tie in with a climbing system, but I was very, very fortunate in that my instructors were always rather excellent. I didn't really have to learn the hard way on a lot of stuff.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, Kristian, I didn't know that. That man, what a gift he gave you, and laying it on like that for you, and that you responded to it too, that you had the wherewithal to take it and move and grow from it. Where do you think you get that from? How did, a lot of people would say F you and start their own business.
Well, I guess, would you repeat the question, Dwayne? Help me out with that one.
Well,
just
a lot of people would take that type of situation and the place they're at in their career with confidence. I can do removals. I know how to stack brush. I know how to lay the butts the one way. You don't want me around? Fine. I'm going to borrow money for a chainsaw and a pickup, and I'm going to friggin' put you out of business. You watch and start their own. That's very common. And you thought about it, went back and decided to try it his way. That's very interesting.
I think it comes back to, I think I drew back from when I was in the Navy. There were certain leaders, when they said something, they demanded that I took it at face value and that I did it exactly the way they said to do so. And I didn't like the way that they treated me. So it was kind of like, I hate being told what to do, so I'm looking for what needs to be done. They would say things like, there's no reason in the world this compartment should ever have this much trash in it, and don't ever let this trash can fill more than 1/3 of the way up. And I just never did. I didn't like the way they spoke to me, so when the trash cans reached a certain point, I was emptying them out. I was working harder at staying one step ahead of them and looking for the light at the end of the tunnel, the why behind that later on. And Brian, back to Brian, I couldn't stand the way he spoke to me. We would go into McDonald's, Dwayne, and there could be 50 people standing in line, and he would shout above all of them. If he was in the back of the line, just as I was getting ready to order my food, he'd say, "Get it to go, Schultz." And I sure didn't like that. And I got it to go. I got it to go every single day. I got it to go. Every time I got in that line, I never sat down to eat my meal. I always got it to go. I always ate on the road. Right. It was driven by the wrong things. I hated the way he spoke to me, so I just got it to go. And it was one less thing he was going to be bossing me around on. So that sort of, mentally, that sort of informed the way I would follow when I'm in the follower position. And so when Jim told me, always tied in, always wearing chaps, always with head protection, always with glasses on, I didn't want to bother him by having to address PPE issues over and over and over with me. So I got on board very quickly and I stuck it out. And no, as far as starting another business and competing with him, I wasn't that interested in being a business owner, and I didn't have the resources. He had built up clientele. He ruled South Bend. To this day, he's the premier company in South Bend, Indiana. Right. So as far as going in the opposite direction, I sort of was, by just getting on board and doing everything the way that he wanted me to do it. That meant, a lot to me.
Yeah, interesting.
To this day, I do it.
So, talk to us a little bit about your the journey in the comp.
Man, I did my first competition in Michigan in 1997. It's where I met my buddy Vince Kowalski. He was a union climber for Asplund at the time, and he was really, really good. And I had taken a one-day course with Ken Palmer a year and a half before that when I was with Jim Rudolph.
Yeah.
And he made me pay for it. And on a payroll deduction, but I did it, And he said, I just think this information is going to stick to you a lot better if you pay for it yourself, Kristian. And I said, okay, Jim. And I paid for it. And he took it out of my paychecks over the course of 3 weeks. It was lean. It was tight, man. I didn't make a lot of money there. But that was pivotal. And that's where I learned how to footlock. And he was like, okay, you've got all these moves down pat. He said, from here, it's just practice, putting it into production so that you can see a profit from it. And shoot, in the early 90s, if you could show up on time for work, you had a driver's license, you could pack your lunch, and you could footlock. That meant that you could enter a tree spurless and fairly efficient. You could write your own ticket. And that also informed competition because secured footlock was throw-line dependent. And so I sort of had a leg up by having paid $125 for a one-day course. But I had also been pretty committed to secured footlock. And then so I scored I placed third in that event. I placed fourth overall out of 19 people that were competing. And the next year, the format was unchanged and the course was unchanged. There were no changes at all in work climb, aerial rescue, or belayed speed climb. So that year I did better and better and better until eventually 6 years later, I took first place. And then it was said, we should probably change this course. And now leaving anything the same outside of an ascent type event is just out of the question. Everything is going to shift as well. It should, and it makes it interesting. But when I won Michigan off to internationals, I went, and that's when I found out just what a good climber I am, Dwayne. Not very good. And that's a pretty common theme for people that make it there. But I wasn't really there. I had some aspirations, and of course we all dream of winning, but it was more that I was going to be rubbing shoulders with cats like Chisholm, Betta Strazel, Mark Bridge, and of course, meeting all the friends that I have now. And I was just, my life would never be the same without the comp circuit. Eventually, I was no longer interested in competing. I met people like Bruce and Melissa. Yeah. And every year they were taking their vacation to volunteer at International Tree Climbing Championship, which is held in a different location every year. Yeah, and I just could not believe it. I was like, let me get this straight. You take the whole week off to volunteer at this event. And they said, yeah. And we get CEUs, we get our continuing educational units. We benefit from the building of relationships. And I've been friends with them ever since. And that's been 20 years this year.
Yeah, they're great.
That's where I met Bruce. Bruce did my first gear inspection. Bruce Smith did my first gear inspection.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Bruce, I don't know if Bruce ever did Bruce compete? He must have. Or did he must have competed.
Don't know if he competed. I know that he was an official and he and he inspected my gear in Montreal. You guys were You guys were both in Montreal, weren't you?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
You might have been competing.
No, I wasn't.
I would judge. That was my first. I think that was my first time head judge of aerial rescue. I think.
Oh yeah,
I was on the aerial rescue in Montreal too because I was working with Greg Good. We were cranking the dummy up into the tree with the GRCS, right. And I learned about the GRCS from like the man himself. No, it was awesome. Like people often. I often get asked, how do you become a trainer in this industry, or where do I get good training as comps? And I'm like, the best bang for your buck is a tree climbing competition, hands down. Best bang for your buck for any type of training. You'll go there and you'll learn some specific skills. Mostly you'll learn what you don't know. And then you'll pick up really fast on how to get that knowledge. And then just like the networking and the people, that come with being part of the ITCC is just phenomenal. There's just no.
Dude, I think you were hiding out in my gear bag when I first started going there, because that was precisely my experience. Learning what I didn't know, learning that I wasn't, how humbling and how helpful it can be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people that have never competed don't understand the power of like being in the top of a work climb tree and watching someone like Mark Chisholm climb it. And then you do it like within minutes after he does. And then you hit the ground and you're like, Mark, how did you, and you ask him, you can't replace that type of training or information. There's no other way. I mean, of all the training courses I've done, I can't replicate that, you know? It's just, and when you look at what it costs to go to a chapter level competition in your area to compete, it's cheap, man. It's like, it is the best bang for the buck. It really is.
Yeah. And you know, the fact that they are so variable, like, I mean, I know that people get frustrated with, you know, they're, you know, especially on so many chapter levels, like the setup is like one frantic day of, that's the best we could do, you know, and it's certainly less than what happens at the international, but it's still so much of a benefit, and regardless of how, you know, there's always room for improvement, but yeah, like you said, Tony, like, you know, you just can't, it's really a weird thing, because you just can't really pay people to do that kind of thing. You know, I think it would somehow corrupt it, you know, it somehow, I don't know. It's weird. It's a real interesting phenomenon, and it's a, you know, a kind of an organism that's unto itself. And you know, there's a political aspect to it, being part of that association and everything. And you know, I don't know where the future of it's going to go, because I think there's a lot of changes happening. You know, the grassroots of that organization, how it started and to where it's going now. I don't know what the future is going to hold with it. I know that I haven't been as involved, and maybe that's just a function of age, and everybody cycles through. Like my tree climbing tree forest is I'm a bit of a log or a stump in that forest nowadays, as opposed to a part of the canopy maybe, but I'm still there. But maybe one day I'll get back involved a little bit. We'll see. But you know, the comp is I don't know, I really find the I don't know, I don't know what the word is, like if it's spiritual or if it's a consciousness that develops with the group of people that go, and the fact that everyone's there volunteering, everyone is a servant of sorts, because no one's paid. You know, some people get expenses covered a little bit and that type of thing, but fundamentally it's a labor of love, and I think that's what gives it its appeal, and what you can tap into, and you know, it's rare exception. I don't think there is anyone there that wouldn't freely give of their knowledge or time or help anyone, if even only asked. That's all you need to do. It's a very unique, you know, I was at the World Surfboard Championships by fluke. I managed to be in Turtle Bay on our way back from the New Zealand chapter. I was speaking down there, and our flight took us through Honolulu, so we just stayed there for a week, you know, and the surfboard championships were happened to be on, the worlds. And it was the only time I realized what it must be like to be at the tree climbing championships for a stranger, because there I was standing on the beach, and I'm watching the cameras, and the surfboards are going on, and I'm standing beside this guy, and I just start talking to him, and I'm like, so, and he's teaching me everything they're doing, what they're marking them on, and how it's going. I could tell the guy knows his stuff. And not 10 minutes later, I look over, and he's in front of these cameras, and he's being interviewed, you know, on TSN and all this stuff. And these people come over and say, man, how do you know so-and-so, right? And I'm like, oh, I don't. I was just, oh, you know, they thought I knew him because he was the current champion. And I'm sitting there just shooting the shit with them on the beach, like, and he's talking to me like I'm, you know, no big deal. And I knew that, and I'm like, wow, this is like, because the same thing could happen at an ITCC. Somebody could just walk through the park, walk up to Bettis or to Mark or anybody and just, they'd talk to him and tell him about the event and have no clue they're talking to the 9-time champion, right? Like, and there I was talking, I don't even know the guy's name, but I know he was a defending world surfboard champion, and he was telling me about the event. And I mean, that kind of it's not unique to just tree climbing, because I saw it there at the surfboard championship and the family atmosphere that was around the people. It's when everyone's doing something they love and not doing it for the money. I think there's something in that.
Yeah, I think I think the ITCC almost always has to be a volunteer thing. It never bothered me to volunteer for the 21 years I volunteered. I never once begrudged the time that I volunteered. I never had an issue with that. I've had some issues with expenses and just different things, hoops that you would jump through here and there. And I think, Dwayne, you and I talked about the ITCC probably when it was in Washington, D.C., where we kind of equated it to, it's like an old tree, right? And I think the ITCC as it stands now is probably in decline, but I think something will take its place. I don't know what that's going to look like or how it's going to work. And the ITCC is going to be around for a while, but I think something else is going to spring up, is going to sprout to life and start to take its place and rebuild it. Because it has, like all things, like an old tree, they don't live forever. It has its growth patterns and it had its peak. And I think it might be declining just a little bit. But that's fine, too, because if that tree never declines and then turns back to the soil, then new trees can't grow. Right. So I don't look on it nostalgically or sad. I look on it more as just the process of basically like an evolution of, and I look forward. I hope I'm around to see, still involved in the industry enough to see what the ITCC can turn into, because it's a phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, it's just on a personal thing for me. It was phenomenal because, like you, Kristian, I got out of the military, right out of high school, got out of the military, and I think what affected me most was I was now no longer had a hive. I didn't have a tribe anymore.
Yeah.
I lived and worked with a group of men. We did everything together. I was very rarely alone for 4 years. Was never alone. And then I suddenly get out and I needed a new tribe, and I found that in tree work, and I found that specifically directly through the tree climbing competitions. And
you've written about that quite a lot too, haven't you, Tony?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that of all the things that affected me, when I got out of the service, having served in the Persian Gulf and all that, I think what affected me the most was that loss of community. Because Kristian, you're we went and took a crap together. We did everything together. I was never ever alone. If I ever wanted to do something, I just looked to my right and said, "Hey," and we did. And then that all changed literally overnight for me. And I'm just wandering around like, what the hell am I going to do? And because I joined the Army so I didn't have to be an arborist. I was trying to get away from it, and then found it coming back because I needed that sense of community. And I think that when you really try and describe the ITCC and what arboriculture is at its best as an industry, you have to describe it as a tribe.
That's a great way to put it. We evolved. Not only did each of us find home in a way when we attended in any capacity, but it's so interesting going back now and seeing people walk around in disbelief saying, I never knew it was going to be like this. I had no idea I would find home on the circuit among other competitors. I had no idea that another competitor would hand me a component that I needed to compete. I had no idea that others would help me out. I wasn't ready for this. Many people leave in tears.
Yep. No, you're right. And now we're touching on the, to me, kind of the true essence of, kind of the inspiration behind this whole thing, speaking of the human forest, and talking about how it's affected us professionally, but personally, and here we are, we're not talking really about arboriculture. We are, but we're talking about how it's affected our lives and what it's brought to us, what meaning and purpose it's brought to us, that connection through trees, as people, and personally. And it's really, I don't know that everyone always, I don't know, maybe it's an age thing or a state of life thing where you're able to start to recognize that or articulate that, that you can appreciate the, I don't know, it's the spiritual side or the esoteric side of what,
it's deeply
what this industry brings.
Just call it like it is.
Yeah. And, I don't know if it's what it is. I don't know if it's the trees or what, but the trees are part of it. It's just something there. It's really strange. I don't, like I said, I've only experienced a similarity with those surfboard championships, but I don't know many industries that, and that isn't even a career really, I suppose. Like it's not a job. You can't surf for a living, I don't think. Maybe some people do.
Yeah,
But
you
tree
see
work is like a job that transcends into this other realm of, trees and oceans have a lot more in common than trees and carpentry or plumbing, maybe, so to speak. I always seem to pick on carpenters and plumbers. I don't like to do that either but you know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense.
I think no matter what you do, you can find purpose in it. And that purpose can be spiritual, maybe based on any number of things, the people that you work with, for example. But arboriculture is a hotbed of people that find the spiritual connection in their work, if you even want to call it work. When you think about it, we get to run around out in the woods with our friends and make big sticks into little sticks.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Well, I think the
It's
fact that
true.
what we work on, the trees are living and growing,
Yeah.
changes it, right? If you build a
Yeah.
bridge, it stays the same for however long that bridge lasts, and that doesn't mean it doesn't have purpose. But I've having worked at the family business for 30 years. We occasionally I go back in to visit with the crews, and they're on a property, and I'm like, I can see that a tree I climbed 25 years ago, and and just to walk up and touch it, and now a lot of these trees, they're on their second or third owner. I occasionally come across clients and I meet their children, and they're grown now, and I knew their children when they were,
wow.
and it's all. I think the fact that the tree itself changes and grows, and that's what we work on is vital to that spiritual side of it. I think it would be different if we were carving stone or pouring concrete, and not to belittle those things. It's all important. I just think that the fact that what we work on grows and changes demands us to look at it differently. Because if we didn't, we just cut them all down, right? You just cut them all down. Like, want to remove the hazard, cut it down, but it's
Right.
not like that. It has intrinsic value in and of itself, even without us, right? I think that, for me at least, has been the changing point. And I don't know if I think that I've always been able to. I think I've always sensed that, in that sense of community. But I think you're right, Dwayne. I think there's a certain perspective that comes with having done the work for 20 plus years, 30 plus years for all of us, that allows us to articulate it better and to appreciate it. Right? Maybe when I was 20, hell, I didn't know. I just needed beer money and a job. But I was fortunate that I
Yeah.
fell into the one I did.
So that's an interesting, I was just thinking about, as you said that, like, I think of somebody that, they're like someone that's been a plumber or a carpenter or been a shipbuilder or a bridge builder or been that for a decade or two. I think maybe something happens in them too. And like, it's like in our interview with Wenda, when she just knew that she had found what she wanted to do. She climbed that tree and she was trying to qualify for a training thing, and she got to the top of this test climb that they had, and she just knew this is it. And I think that I think can happen for people in different vocations, like, or I think that's what makes it a vocation when you reach that point. And when,
True.
like, that's something I just thought of, like, when do you feel, you, Tony, or Kristian, when do you feel that happen for you? Like, when did you get the moment? Can you remember when it was like, okay, this is it. This is what I'm meant to do. Or did you feel you found that?
At my first company, the first time I saw someone rappel out of a tree on a taut line hitch,
Yeah.
I knew that that's what I was going to do, and there was nothing that was going to stop me. I just didn't think it would happen as quickly as it did, and it happened
Wow.
very, very quickly for me. Like within a couple of months, I was climbing actively. I wasn't very good, but I was still climbing. And then, of course, there were pivotal moments along the route that led me
Right, right.
here.
But
And so,
there's that
Tony, what
one
was
where
your
you
first?
just yeah, sorry. There's that one where you just know. And Tony, like, must have happened for you at some point. Cause I mean, you talk openly, I'm always interesting. And it's kind of what made me think of it here. Like, you talk about, you didn't want to be a part of it. You went into the military and then you're out of the military. Now it's like, shit, this is all that's there. But yet here you are, clearly passionate and, fully involved in this business. So do you know did you have that feeling at some point?
Uh, Probably not as clear cut as many people, because like I said, I got out of the Army, and then I started doing other things, and I went to school and I got my degree. But all that time I was working with my brother, and quite honestly, the work was fine, but it was easy and he needed help, right? I didn't have to fill out a job application. It was super flexible. Like, Ben would be like, "Hey, Tony, can you work, this week, your spring break?" Like, sure. If I said yes, great. If not, so it was the easy button for me through college. But then there was a point where, you can't, I'm now like 28. I have a reasonable skill set in tree care, but I also have a military service behind me. You got to do something with your life, right? Like, I didn't want to. And basically, really, the reason I said yes and chose tree care as a career was because my brother needed the help, and I didn't want to leave him behind. He had given me something when I needed it. And so I can literally to this day remember sitting down saying, "All right, Ben, I'll work," because he offered me a job. Because when you leave Penn State with a degree in philosophy, there's not a lot of employment options. So he's like, and I remember I said, "Yeah, Ben, I'll do this for a couple of years, then I'll find something else." And in that couple of years, I gave it to help my brother out. Somewhere along the line, I realized that it was the tribe that I was looking for, and that was through, because I very much like Kristian. They sent me. I did an Arbor Master program. And met with Ken and Rip. And from that, like in 2000, the ITCC was in Baltimore, which was just, it's just two hours south of the house here. And I'm like, "Hey, Ben," and I knew Ken and Rip were involved in ITCC, and I'd known, a couple people here and there. And I'm like, "Hey, Ben, I just want to volunteer. I just want to go down and see if I can help out. I know Ken, I know Rip. I'm sure they can do." So I just show up, and my brother's like, "Sure, I'll give you the days off." And so I just show up, and they, and I just basically showed up at ITCC till they just either didn't tell me to leave, and gave me a job. Like, that's all I ever did. People are like, "How'd you get involved in ITCC?" Literally, I just showed the fuck up and I didn't leave. And I showed up in 2000. I missed 2001 because that was Milwaukee. We had some storm damage. 2002 in Seattle, I just showed up. 2003, I continued, and eventually got to the point where Tim Bushnell was like the head tech. And I'm like, "Tim, I need a job. I need some direction here." Like, because I was working everywhere. And that's when he put me on Footlock, and I was in the Footlock tree when, Mark was breaking world records, and it was awesome.
Yeah. There was one in, I think it was Minneapolis. You had ridden your motorcycle cross country for that event.
Yeah.
I thought you were just like, I just worship you, dude. I thought you were one of the most charismatic, most interesting people I'd ever met. I still remember meeting you, for real the first time, and I think it was Minneapolis.
That's some pretty high praise there. If Kristian Michael Schultz is calling me charismatic.
Whoa, there was so many cool people, so many just interesting characters across the industry.
That was 2006 in Minneapolis, and I always remember that was my most. It was the peak of my competition climbing career, because I finished second to Jim Roach that year in the chapter. I always seem to finish second to Jim. Second or third or 10th, but I only did not compete at the ITCC that year by like 3 points. I lost the Masters Challenge by like 3 points to Jim, who, at his peak, he never broke the top 10. I think sixth in the world, but he never made it to the Masters. But he was always like just one or two short a couple of years. So it's like,
I remember him.
Yeah, I was not that. So that Minneapolis was, but that was also the point in my climbing career where I realized I was having more fun helping set up than I was competing.
Yes, you were secured Footlock that year with me. And Rich Hattier. Yeah, Hattier was there. I'm trying to think who else was there. Of course, Kevin Bassett had the lead, and Warren Williams was head technician that year.
Yeah, sounds about right. Yeah.
It's a pretty killer crew. Up until then, it seemed to me that the climbers were not really being introduced to the audience very well. And so I started making this big deal out of it. Yeah. Some climbers really dug it. Some people, this was where a defining moment in their life. And I felt to introduce them in grand fashion, and some people really appreciate it, and some rarely did not appreciate it as much.
Yeah, there are the odd person. Yeah, and I would take on that kind of role at the Masters, right? I would kind of sort of be the announcer. Yeah, and some liked it better than others. For sure. But I don't know who's taking on that role now. So are you doing that, Kristian, now?
I am set to volunteer this year. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going no matter what. I don't know about Masters Challenge. I know that I'll probably work the Ascent event
Okay.
this year
Yeah.
in Albuquerque. And I have not been asked anything about Masters Challenge. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see what happens.
You'd be good for it. That'd be good.
And you do a
But,
spectacular job too.
yeah, it's for me, it's interesting because my pivotal moment for what I wanted to do when I had that wasn't tree care. It was teaching. It was when I got asked to teach after I graduated college. Some teachers thought that I'd be good to teach off campus. They had an off campus apprenticeship program happening, and they needed a contract instructor. And my name was put forward. And so I ended up teaching a plant ID and some chainsaw and pruning, like 2 months, classroom style, in this, they had rented this old shop in this little town, it was a satellite program, and I just thought, this is it. Like, that was my moment and it wasn't,
This
it's
was a
been
paid
teaching
gig?
tree. Yeah, this would have been in like 1990, 1990-ish, 89,
Uh-huh.
90. And, oh no, it might've been more like 91, 92. Anyways, I just was like, no, I was already teaching then. It was 90. I was just like, this is it. This is what I want to do. I want to teach. It was like this. It wasn't about, I wouldn't have cared what I was teaching. It was just teaching. I wanted to be an instructor. And the most logical thing was teaching arboriculture at the college. Like, it hit me. I'd never thought of it before. It was just like, boom. This is when I spent the next 3 years applying and being rejected. And I just relentlessly, they basically hired me because I wouldn't stop applying.
Uh-huh.
And that was how but it wasn't, it was very much around instruction and teaching people and coaching. I really like to coach as well, but and whatever the topic, and I think that's maybe how, for me, my journey evolved into training trainers, right?
Mm-hmm.
I almost consider that more of what I like to do than teaching trees, even. Is teaching people how to teach. But anyways, the comp, yeah, you can, I don't, it's an indebtedness and a gratitude I think I can't quite ever repay,
Well,
the
there's a
feeling you
couple
get of
there's a
being,
couple ways, and you probably don't need me to tell you this, but just by paying it forward, you totally pay that debt. If you think
well,
of it that way.
sure. Well, that's great. I maybe so. And it's such a great experience to be part of. And I would strongly encourage everyone, I haven't been for the last few years, and, I'm not really since COVID, I guess I haven't been to one, and I almost went this year, but maybe next year. I'm hoping DJ, my son's competing now, and hope he'll qualify one of these days. And then, that'll
Yeah.
be I'm when he qualifies to compete, that'll be my reunion, and I'll just go and watch. And actually, and no one can loop me into anything because my son's competing. I have to just watch. We'll
I've
see.
never
We'll see.
been
We'll
to a
see.
competition to watch since 1998 was the last
Wouldn't it be
competition I
cool
went
though
to
to just watch?
I don't know.
I think it'd be
I
cool.
think I don't
No.
know. I don't know.
I could never just watch.
It might be like
That's
me in a
because
tree job now. It'd be like, when I was doing this, it'd be done way better and faster. That'd be that. It's like,
More done
Yeah.
with less and
Well,
faster.
exactly.
yeah. That's
You
what
guys
I'm
don't know
saying.
nothing. We used to have to do blah blah blah. That might be me.
Yeah,
So maybe
you're gonna
that's
be
why I'm
that
staying
guy.
there.
I'll
I'm
be
gonna
that
be
old
that
guy
guy.
in the corner. You guys,
When I was
you
doing
guys
this,
ruined this event. Get it to go.
get it to go.
Let it go, Schultz.
That's funny.
So, Kristian, I love the way you orate and put things into words, and you've always been, I don't know what the word is, a masterful wordsmith, and you express your emotions so articulately, and I really have found you to always be very in touch with yourself, and you can, and I'm curious, if you were to try to describe what the trees have, how being in the trees has affected you personally. Like, it's like, how could you articulate, like, we've talked about professionally and we started touching on the spiritual side of things, but like, how would you describe that, how trees have affected who Kristian is?
Wow. It's not, believe it or not, it's not something I've given a lot of thought to. It's just come after a while. It just comes so natural that when I'm in the air, I am scared at times. Sometimes
Yeah.
I'm really afraid, and I have to be very deliberate about one move to another. I'm going to route clockwise, not counterclockwise, or whatever it is that I'm going to do. I'm not really thinking about that. I'm not thinking about how it's. I'm already there. I'm not conscious of where it's placed me spiritually when I'm in the moment, especially when I approach a tree and I'm doing a site inspection or something like that, and I'm in position. I'm simply there. It's very meditative. It's deeply spiritual. It defies description for me. I have no words for it. I just don't. I know that I don't judge it, and I don't question it whatsoever. And when
as
I'm
far as a friend and a husband and a uncle and all that sort of thing, like, does that influence has the trees affected you in that way, do you think?
Very much so. All of my relatives know that. Everybody in my life knows where I am, and it's not something I really. This is the most I've talked about it in a long time. After a while, that's just what people associate you with.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, much like both of you, you're no longer really doing it for yourself. You're sort of doing it. I mean, you're doing it because that's what you have to do. But when you're teaching somebody and when you're sharing and learning from them, when you make it about them, I don't mean to deflect.
Yeah.
Because I know how important it is that we accept. But I make a living by making it about them, the others around me, and letting them see and letting them feel. And it's no longer the Kristian Michael Schultz show.
Well, isn't that, it just popped into my mind here as you were saying that, like, it's quite a reflection of almost how trees are, really. Like, trees give so much and really don't expect a lot, or they don't take a lot. They give a lot more than they take, for sure.
Right. They don't need our input. We just think they do.
Yeah.
When we remove our egos,
yeah,
that's when we kind of come to the realization they do not need our input.
And collectively they're so much stronger and provide so much more to everyone around them, right? As a forest is much more powerful than an individual.
Human beings do nothing but, I don't mean to sound negative, but human beings consume and consume and consume. We don't make oxygen. We don't filter water. Right. We don't ward off. Well, we can ward off depression for each other, but trees are known to. We take and take and take, and trees do nothing but give.
Yeah, interesting.
That'll be $5.
Hold on. What's that doing?
Kristian said that's his $5. That's his therapy fee. $5.
Oh. Well, I don't know, how long have we been at, Tony?
A little over an hour.
We're at our magic number. It's Kristian. I don't know what it is. I swear the clocks must be set wrong or something, because the Roman calendar and clock are keeping time is it's something about 70 to 80 minutes. It's not 60. Like it always seems like we have a natural kind of place just over an hour. It's really weird. Like I don't know why, but there's something in it.
Clock of sorts,
some sort of circadian rhythm, that is more natural on a 70, 80 minute thing, not a 60 minute thing, we've tried to fit so much of life into these not just categories of thinking, or at least I do, but also in these time frames, days, months, years, and minutes. Everything's structured around these constructs, that I think
it's kind of a cram,
if you're not careful, can really affect because I don't think we're really wired that way. And, again, the forest doesn't really adhere to those parameters. Neither does nature, right? Like the whole, day length and time changes, other than equatorial, where you have very little day length and time change. Oh,
yeah, only people do this stuff.
So I know I guess what I'm saying is we're winding down, but there's one thing.
Yeah.
And for those that have listened to the very end, it's one of my most favorite stories to tell about one of my friends. And that is, and I know a lot of people think I'm full of shit when I say this, but I can say with great confidence, and I can never really prove it, and I don't care because I know it is true. And that is, the final docking or parking of that great ship that you are one of the few people. Like, I don't think a lot of people can claim the claim that you can, and I'm not going to steal your thunder because I want you to tell us about that. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'd like for people to be able to hear you tell that story because I think it is one of the coolest things, Kristian. And so I'm putting you on the spot.
Okay. That's all right. When I joined the Navy in 1984, and I was not eligible for Navy SEALs. And so I ended up out in the fleet and just happened to be assigned to USS Missouri, the famous battleship on which World War II was signed to a close by the Japanese in in Tokyo Harbor. And the ship was being brought back into commission, and the due date was in early 1986. And we met that goal. And in order to set sail, they needed people in certain qualifications. So they needed people that knew how to steer. They had to have people that knew how to steer. So I was with a group of people that transferred over temporarily to USS New Jersey, a famous battleship as well, to learn how to steer. And so when we all learned how to steer, we would have to do so in a watch cycle when we put to sea. And if you wanted to, you could excel. You could become a master helmsman. So I actually made master helmsman. I was the youngest master helmsman in the history of the ship at 19 years old. And everybody on board deserved bragging rights on something, but or they were the first or the only or the youngest or the oldest, and that was kind of my claim, and I was quite proud of it. And I spent a lot of time at the helms, steering and steering and steering, and then I learned to steer alongside other ships such as USS Forstall, USS Enterprise, and receiving fuel and mail from these other ships while in motion. Nothing like steering 15 knots through rough seas alongside an aircraft carrier. And when she heeled over to port, the entire flight deck would sort of cast a shadow over our ship and then very slowly recoil. And I steered in and out of, you had to have a master helmsman at the helm for certain evolutions, and steering into and out of port was one of them. And so there were two other master helmsmen on board when I was there. After I split, they added two, and so they had four after I left. But at the time, there was only three of us. And right when we were to steer into Pearl Harbor for the first time since World War II, I don't know how it was decided, but some officer up on deck whipped around to the three of us and said, "Schultz, you have the lead on this." And I said, "Okay." Yes, sir. And I took the helm and steered back into Pearl Harbor for the first time since World War II. And then I had a couple other big dockings, one of which was San Francisco. When you come in under the Golden Gate Bridge, there are a lot of distractions for a battleship of that size. And some of them were that there were hundreds of people up on the Golden Gate Bridge, and some of them were throwing flowers down to us. And some of them were not throwing flowers down to us. Many of those people did not want us there. And so I got to steer at pier side in San Francisco. I don't know how long it had been since the ship had visited San Francisco, but we got mixed reviews being there. Some people, again, they really didn't want us there. And that's okay. I know that, we all on board ship had good cause to feel good about what we were doing. And so I had any number of really fortunate dockings and steerages that to this day I still sometimes I forget about it because I'm the old guy now, dude. I'm 57 years old now. I forget. Oh my gosh, I'm old.
Yeah.
Was very, very lucky. Very, very fortunate to come under the guidance, and USS Missouri was just a pivotal moment for all of us. I still belong to an association and a Facebook page, and I'm in touch with a lot of my old shipmates.
Nice. I have no doubt in it, and I just feel lucky to know someone that did that. Like it's really cool. And I've been to Pearl Harbor, the memorial. That same trip where I saw the surfboard championships. We went there and spent the day. And I've been on the boat, and I already knew this about you had told me that, so it's just a whole different meaning. Knowing it's just holy crap because it's not that there's nothing to be. It's a magnificent vessel, to say the least.
It is. Yeah, she's my old girlfriend.
And it's interesting because, we talk about, other vocations having, not being the same. But I think anyone that had a hand in building that ship or piloting it or being a part of it, there's something else that forms there too. That I think's akin to the feeling that some of us get being arborists for our whole lives. So I think it does happen in other ways and places and other types of construction. Where people have that spiritual type of feeling that goes with doing something that you have pride in and purpose in. I think there's a real power in that. Well, Tony, Kristian,
really cool.
It's been fun.
It's been a great session. I feel so lucky and blessed every time we do one of these. They just keep getting better, Tony. And Kristian, I'm so glad that you made it. You made it, and we got to do this thing because I knew it was going to be a good one.
Yeah, finally. And thanks so much for this opportunity.
No problem.
You're welcome.